"Don't let them see me," she whispered, grabbing his arm so tight he felt her shaking. And when Caleb looked down, her hands were stained dark and her breath came fast like she had been running for miles. He followed her gaze and saw the child behind her, no older than 5, barely standing, eyes half closed. And something in Caleb's chest tightened because this wasn't a threat. This was desperation. The creek water moved slow behind them, quiet. But the air wasn't. There was a sound far off. Hooves, more than one rider, closing in, and fast. Caleb pulled his arm free just enough to look at her. Really look. Her eyes locked on his, not begging, not crying, just waiting, like she already knew what men like him usually did. "I didn't kill him," she said, voice low, steady. But she didn't explain, didn't defend, just let the words hang there heavy. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't know her, didn't know the story. But he knew one thing. People didn't run like that unless something worse was behind them. The hoofbeats got louder, maybe 100 yards now, dust rising beyond the ridge, and Caleb felt the choice hit him all at once. Help her and risk everything, or step back and let it pass. He exhaled slow, then moved, quick and certain, grabbing her wrist and guiding her toward the rocks near the creek bank. "Down," he said, firm, pulling off his coat and pressing it into her hands. "Wrap him, stay low, don't make a sound." And she didn't argue, didn't hesitate, just dropped. Beside the stone, pulling the child close, Caleb stepped away, boots crunching lightly on dry gravel, then turned his back to them just as the riders crested the ridge. 3 men, eyes sharp, scanning everything. One raised his voice. "You there, cowboy, you see a woman come through here?" Caleb didn't answer right away, just stood still, heart steady but loud in his ears, then shook his head once, slow. "No," he said, voice calm, like it meant nothing. The men looked at each other, then back at him, one narrowing his eyes. "She's dangerous," he added, like a warning, like a test. Caleb didn't move, didn't reach for anything, just held their gaze, and after a long second, they rode past, not gone, just further down the trail, still searching. Caleb waited until the sound of hooves faded, then turned back toward the rocks. But something had changed. The air felt heavier, like the truth was still hiding there. He stepped closer, slower now, and that's when he saw it. The child in her arms, small chest rising weak but steady, and her hands, not just stained, but protecting, holding on like she would never let go. Caleb stopped, something pulling at him he couldn't ignore, and one question hit him hard. If she didn't do what they said, then what really happened out here, and why did it feel like this was only the beginning? Caleb did not speak right away. He just stood there, watching her hold the child like the world depended on it. And maybe it did, because the way she moved, careful, controlled, told him she had been doing this for a long time. The wind shifted slightly, carrying dust from the trail, and Caleb's eyes flicked back toward the ridge. Those riders were not gone. Not really. Men like that did not quit easy. They circled. They waited. They came back when you least expected. "They will return," she said quietly, still not looking at him. Her voice steady but low, like she had already accepted it. And that made something in Caleb tighten again. He stepped closer, just enough to see the child's face, pale but calm now, wrapped in his coat. And he noticed something else. No fear in the child's eyes, only trust, like this woman had already carried him through worse than this. Caleb ran a hand over his jaw, thinking fast. This was already bigger than a moment at the creek, bigger than one lie. Because now it followed him, and whatever trouble she carried was standing right here on his land. "You cannot stay here," he said. But the words did not sound right even to him, because he had already chosen the moment he said no to those men. She finally looked up, eyes locking with his, sharp, searching. "I will leave," she said. Simple, no pleading, no argument, just a decision. But she did not move, and neither did he. The sound of a distant crow broke the silence. Then another, and Caleb turned his head slightly, scanning the open land. Something fell off, too quiet, like the desert was holding its breath. "If you walk out there, they will find you before sunset," he said, voice lower now, more certain, because he knew these lands. He knew how far a person could go on tired legs, and it was not far enough. She looked down at the child, her grip tightening just a little, and that was the first crack. The the first sign she was not as steady as she seemed. Caleb exhaled, long and slow, then made the decision he had been avoiding since the moment she touched his arm. "My place is 2 miles north," he said, nodding toward the low hills. "Small ranch. Water, shelter." He paused, just a second, then added, "They will not look there first." And even as he said it, he knew that might not stay true for long. Her eyes studied him again, deeper this time, like she was weighing more than just the offer, like she was deciding if he was another mistake she could not afford. The wind picked up slightly, dust lifting off the ground, and then Caleb heard it again, faint but clear, hoofbeats, closer than before, not on the main trail this time, spreading out. His jaw set. "You do not have time," he said, stepping back toward his horse, already reaching for the reins. "Either you come with me now, or you run and hope they miss you." He swung up in one smooth motion, then extended his hand down toward her, strong, steady, no hesitation. She looked at that hand for a long second, then back at the horizon, then at the child, and when she moved, it was fast, decisive. She took his hand, and in that moment Caleb felt it. This was no longer just help. This was a line crossed, something that would not undo itself. He pulled her up behind him, the child held tight between them, and as he turned the horse north, the sound of riders broke through the wind again. Closer now, too close, and Caleb knew one thing for sure. Whatever she was running from had just found him too. And there was no turning back now. The horse moved fast, hooves pounding dry earth as Caleb pushed north, the wind cutting across his face. And behind him, he could feel her grip tighten every time the sound of riders echoed closer. He did not look back again. He did not need to. He knew they were spreading out, hunting smart now, not chasing, and that made it worse. "Hold on," he said, low and steady, one hand on the reins, the other keeping balance as the land dipped and rose, every turn a gamble, every second buying them distance or losing it. The child stayed quiet between them, too quiet, and Caleb felt that too, a weight heavier than the danger behind them, because this was not just escape. This was survival, and survival always came with a cost. The ranch came into view after what felt like miles but was barely two. A small house, a well, a barn leaning slightly to one side. Nothing special, but it was his, and now it was something else, a place that could either hide them or expose them. He pulled the horse in hard, dust kicking up as he jumped down, then turned, lifting the child first, careful, steady, then helping her down without a word. "Inside," he said, already moving, pushing the door open, scanning the room in one sweep, everything as he left it. But it felt different now, smaller, like it could not hold what was coming. She stepped in, slow, eyes moving across every corner, not in wonder, not in relief, but in calculation, like she was mapping exits before she allowed herself to breathe. Caleb shut the door behind them, slid the bolt across, then crossed to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain just enough to see the horizon. Nothing yet, but that meant nothing. They were out there. "Put him on the bed," he said, pointing, already moving to grab water from the basin, his mind working faster now. This was no longer a moment. This was a situation, one that would not fade when the sun went down. She laid the child down gently, hands lingering just a second longer than needed, and when Caleb handed her the water, she did not drink. She gave it to the child first, small careful sips, and that told him everything he needed to know about who she was. Caleb leaned against the table for a second, just a second, then looked at her, really looked this time. "You said you did not kill him," he said, voice even. "Then why are they hunting you like this?" And the room went still, the kind of still that made every sound outside louder. She did not answer right away. Her eyes dropped to the child, then back to Caleb, and when she spoke, it was quieter than before, but heavier. "Because they will not believe me," she said, and that was not an answer. Not really. It was something else, something deeper. Caleb frowned slightly. "Believe what?" He pressed one step forward now, because he needed to know what he had just brought into his home. She hesitated, just for a moment, then said, "The man they say I killed, he was going to take the child." And Caleb felt something shift, not relief, not yet, but understanding starting to form, and with it, a bigger problem. He glanced back toward the window, the light outside already changing, shadows stretching longer across the land. And then he saw it. Far off, movement, small but clear, riders again. More this time, spreading wider, heading this way. Caleb straightened slowly, his voice lower now, sharper. "How many are coming?" he asked, not looking at her, eyes fixed on the horizon. And when she answered, it was immediate, certain, enough. And that was when it became real, not just for her, but for him, because whatever truth she carried, whatever injustice drove her here, it was now standing inside his walls, and the question was no longer if they would come, but what he was going to do when they did. Caleb did not move away from the window. His eyes locked on the distant riders as they spread wider across the land, not rushing, not panicking, just closing in like they already knew where to look. Behind him, he heard the faint shift of fabric as she adjusted the child on the bed, careful, quiet, like even the smallest sound might bring danger closer. "They think you did it," Caleb said, more to himself than to her, his voice low, steady, but tight, because the way those men moved told him something else. This was not just anger. This was certainty, and certainty was harder to break. "They needed someone to blame," she answered, and this time there was something different in her voice. Not fear, not even sadness, but something heavier, something worn down by time, like she had been carrying this long before she reached his land. Caleb turned slightly, just enough to see her without losing sight of the horizon. "Needed," he repeated, and that word hung there, because it did not sound like truth mattered anymore, only what people chose to believe. She nodded once, slow. "The man, he had power," she said, choosing each word carefully. No one would question him, and Caleb felt that sink in, because he had seen that before in towns, in places where one voice could shape the story before anyone else spoke. The child stirred slightly on the bed, a small sound escaping him, and both of them looked at once, tension snapping tight again. But the boy only shifted closer to her, seeking warmth, safety, and she placed her hand gently over his chest, grounding him without a word. Caleb stepped away from the window now, moving toward the table, grabbing a rifle, checking it out of habit, not raising it, not threatening, just preparing, because the line he crossed at the creek was not a line you could step back from. "If they come here," he said, voice firm now, more certain, "they will not ask twice." And that was not a threat. It was a fact, something he had learned a long time ago. She stood slowly, leaving the child resting, and faced him fully now, her eyes steady, searching his face like she needed to understand something deeper than his words. "Then I will leave before they do," she said, and there it was. Again, that same choice, the same instinct to remove herself, to carry the burden alone, and Caleb felt something in him resisted immediately. "You walk out there now. They will see you," he replied, sharper this time, stepping closer without thinking. "And then everything you did to protect him means nothing." His hand gestured toward the child, not accusing, not blaming, just stating what neither of them wanted to say out loud. She held his gaze, unflinching, but there was a shift now, something breaking under the weight of it all. "It already means nothing to them," she said quietly. And for the first time, Caleb saw it clearly, not just a woman running, but someone who had already lost her place, her voice, her chance to be heard. Outside, the wind changed again, carrying a faint sound, closer now, unmistakable, and Caleb moved back to the window fast, pulling the curtain just enough to see. And there they were, not far now, maybe half a mile, spreading toward the ranch from both sides. His jaw tightened, his grip on the rifle firm but controlled, and he spoke without turning back. "They are not just passing through," he said, voice low, heavy with what that meant. "They are coming here." And the room seemed to shrink around them, the walls no longer a shelter but a line, one that would be tested soon. Behind him, she did not speak, did not move, but he could feel it, the weight of her presence, the child, the truth she carried, all of it now tied to his next decision. And Caleb knew this was no longer about a moment of kindness. This was something else entirely, something that would change everything. And the question hit him hard, louder than the approaching hooves. When they reached that door, would he still stand between them and her? Or had he already gone too far to turn back? The first knock did not come from the door. It came from the ground, a vibration through the wood beneath Caleb's boots, steady, heavy, closer than before, and he did not need to look again to know they were already surrounding the ranch. He tightened his grip on the rifle, then slowly lowered it, not because the danger was gone, but because something else had just taken its place, something heavier. Behind him, she moved, fast but quiet, and when he turned, she was already lifting the child again, wrapping him tighter in the coat, her hands steady but her eyes different now, resolved. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked, stepping forward, tension snapping sharp in his voice, but she did not answer right away. She just looked at the door, then back at him, and when she spoke, it hit harder than anything else so far. "If I leave now, they stop looking here," she said, simple, direct, like it was already decided, like she had already accepted the cost. Caleb shook his head once, immediate. "No." The word came out stronger than he expected, and he stepped closer, blocking her path without thinking, because something about that choice felt wrong, too easy for everyone except her. She did not step back. She met him where he stood, eyes locked. "You gave us shelter," she said, voice low but firm. "That is already more than anyone else." And there it was, the truth underneath everything. She did not expect to be saved. She only expected to be allowed to leave. The child stirred again, small fingers gripping the edge of the coat, and Caleb looked down at him, then back at her, and something shifted inside him, something deeper than logic, deeper than risk. "They will take him," she added quietly, and that was the anchor, the line that settled everything. Not loud, not dramatic, just real, and it hit Caleb harder than the sound of hooves outside. He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face, and for a second he saw it clearly. What would happen if he stepped aside? If he let her walk out that door, the problem would leave, the danger would pass, and his life would go back to what it was, quiet, simple, untouched. But then he looked at the child again, at the way he held onto her like she was the only thing keeping him standing. And Caleb knew that was not true anymore, not after what he had already done. Another sound came from outside, closer now, voices low, controlled, and Caleb turned toward the door, his posture changing, not tense, not uncertain, just decided. He stepped in front of her fully now, placing himself between her and the entrance, and his voice, when he spoke, was calm, steady, final. "You are not walking out that door." And he did not raise it. He did not need to. She stared at him, searching, like she was trying to understand why a man with no reason to stay would choose to stand. And Caleb held her gaze without looking away, because the answer was already there, in everything that had happened since the creek. The voices outside grew clearer, boots on dirt, a shadow passing across the window, and Caleb reached for the bolt on the door, checking it once more, not because it would stop them, but because it marked the line he had just drawn. Behind him, she did not move anymore, did not argue, but he could feel it, the weight of her decision shifting, not leaving, not yet. And the question that remained, heavier than anything before, was not whether they would come in, but what Caleb would do when they did, and whether this choice, this one moment, would cost him everything he had ever built. The second knock came sharp and clear against the door, not loud, but deliberate, and Caleb felt it land deeper than the first, because now there was no distance left, no space to think, only the moment in front of him. He did not move right away, his eyes fixed on the wood, listening, counting, one breath, two. Then a voice came through, calm, controlled. "We know she is inside." And Caleb's jaw tightened, because that meant they had tracked her all the way here, not guessed, not searched, but known. Behind him, he heard her shift slightly. The child held close, and for a second he felt it, the weight of everything pressing in at once, the land outside, the men at the door, the life he had built. In this place, all of it balanced on what he would do next. "Open the door," the voice said again, not louder, just firmer, like it expected to be obeyed, and Caleb's hand hovered near the bolt, not touching it, just there, caught between two paths that no longer felt equal. He glanced back over his shoulder, just once, and saw her standing still, eyes on him, not pleading, not asking, just waiting. And the child pressed against her, small fingers gripping the coat tighter now. Caleb exhaled, slowly, and something shifted inside him, not sudden, not explosive, but steady, like a line settling into place. He had already lied once, already brought them here, already crossed that first line at the creek. And this was just the truth catching up. The voice outside spoke again, closer now. You do not want trouble, cowboy. And Caleb almost let out a dry breath at that, because trouble was already here, standing in his house, breathing in his space, asking him to decide what kind of man he was. He stepped forward, closer to the door, his hand finally resting on the bolt, feeling the cold metal under his fingers, and for a second, just a second, he imagined opening it, stepping aside, letting them take what they came for, and everything would end, clean, simple, his life untouched. But then he heard it, not from outside, but from behind him, the soft, uneven breath of the child, fragile, steady, and it pulled him back, grounded him in something real, something that could not be ignored. Caleb closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, and when he spoke, his voice was low but clear. She is not leaving. And the words felt heavier than anything he had said before, because they were not just for the men outside. They were for himself. Silence followed, thick and waiting. Then a shift outside, boots moving, the air changing again, and Caleb stepped back from the door, not retreating, but setting himself, placing his body between the entrance and the two behind him. He reached for the rifle, not raising it, just holding it steady at his side, and his posture changed completely now. No hesitation, no doubt, just presence. Behind him, she did not speak, but he could feel it, the moment landing, the realization that he was not sending her away, not this time, not anymore. Another voice joined the first outside, quieter, sharper, words too low to catch, but the tone was enough. They were deciding something, adjusting, and Caleb felt the tension rise again, higher now, tighter, because whatever came next would not be simple. He glanced once toward the window, seeing shadows shift along the edges of the ranch, more than before, closer, and then back to the door, his grip firm, his stance set, knowing there was no path back to who he was before this. And as the silence stretched, heavy and waiting, one question pressed harder than the rest. Not if they would push further, but how far Caleb was willing to go now that he had chosen to stand. Caleb did not wait for another knock. He moved, fast and certain, his hand locking the bolt tighter, then dragging a heavy wooden table across the floor, the legs scraping loud against the boards, a clear sound. A message, not hiding, not hesitating, but choosing, and outside the voices stopped for a second, just long enough to feel the shift. He stepped back, grabbed a second chair, wedged it under the handle, then turned toward the window and pulled the shutters halfway closed. Not fully, just enough to control what they could see, what he could see. And that was the moment it became real. Not words, not promises, but action that could not be taken back. You are making this worse. The voice came from outside, closer now, right on the other side of the door, calm but sharper, and Caleb stepped forward again, stopping just inches from the wood, his voice steady when he answered. Then it was already bad. And he did not raise it. He did not need to, because the silence that followed said everything. Behind him, she shifted again, but this time it was different, not preparing to leave, not stepping away, but staying, and Caleb could feel it without turning, the weight of her trust settling into the space between them. The child let out a small sound, not fear, not pain, just a tired breath, and Caleb's eyes flicked back for a second, just a second, enough to remind him why he was standing here in the first place. A shadow moved across the window, then another, closer now, and Caleb adjusted his stance, one step to the side, positioning himself where he could see both the door and the edge of the room, his grip tightening around the rifle, not raising it, just holding it like a line he was ready to defend. Last chance. The voice outside said, firmer now, less patient, send her out, and this ends. And Caleb felt the weight of those words settle in his chest, because they were offering him a way out, a clean one. One step and everything would go back, but he had already taken too many steps forward. He exhaled slowly, then spoke, each word clear, deliberate. No one leaves this house. And as soon as the words left his mouth, something outside changed, not loud, not sudden, but definite, like a line had just been crossed on both sides. Boots shifted on the dirt, voices lowered, more movement than before, not leaving, not backing down, but preparing, and Caleb felt the pressure rise again, tighter now, heavier, because this was no longer about asking. This was about what came next. He moved toward the back of the room, quick, grabbing a small lantern, lowering the flame, dimming the light inside so they could not see clearly through the cracks, then stepped back to his position, every movement controlled, purposeful, like he had done this before, even if he had not. Behind him, she stood closer now, not touching, but near enough that he could feel her presence, steady, grounded, and when she spoke, it was softer than before, almost lost under the tension. "Why are you doing this?" And Caleb did not answer right away, because the truth was not simple. It was not one reason. It was everything that had led to this moment. He glanced back at her, just briefly, then forward again, eyes on the door. "Because you are still here," he said, and that was all. No explanation, no defense, just a fact that could not be undone. Outside, a hand pressed briefly against the door, testing, not forcing, just feeling the resistance, and Caleb did not move, did not step back. He held his ground, his breath slow, steady, waiting, and as the seconds stretched, thick and heavy, one thing became clear. This was no longer about protecting someone for a moment. This was about standing against whatever came next, and the question hanging in the air was no longer if they would push harder, but how far Caleb would go now that he had made it impossible to turn back. The silence did not last. It broke slowly, like something tightening outside, then shifting, boots moving across dirt, more than before, spreading wider, circling the ranch instead of standing still, and Caleb felt it immediately. They were not waiting anymore. They were closing in. He stepped toward the window, just enough to see through the narrow gap, and his breath slowed, not from calm, but from focus. There were more of them now, at least 6, maybe more beyond the ridge, not rushing, not loud, just positioning, cutting off every open path. "They are not leaving," he said quietly, more to himself, but she heard it. And behind him, he felt her move closer, the child still held tight, his small hand gripping her sleeve like he knew something was coming. "They will not stop," she answered, and there was no fear in her voice now, just certainty, like she had seen this before, lived through it, and that made Caleb's jaw tighten again, because this was not just about one man. This was something bigger, something that would not end at his door. A sound came from the side of the house, soft but clear, wood shifting under pressure, not breaking, just testing, and Caleb turned fast, moving across the room in 2 steps, placing himself between the sound and the others, his grip tightening around the rifle, not raising it, just ready. "They are checking every side," he said, sharper now, the tension rising again, higher than before, because this was no longer a standoff. This was a search, controlled, patient, and dangerous. The child stirred again, this time letting out a weak sound, and Caleb glanced back, just for a second, enough to see her lower her head slightly, whispering something soft, something calming, and the boy's breathing steadied again, and that moment hit him. Even now, even here, she was not thinking about herself, only him. Another sound came, this time from the back, closer, a hand brushing against the outer wall, slow, deliberate, and Caleb moved again, repositioning, his mind mapping the space, the weak points, the distance to the back door, the well outside, the open land beyond, and none of it felt safe anymore. "There is no way out," she said quietly, not as fear, but as fact, and Caleb did not answer right away, because he was already thinking, already pushing past that, because staying here meant waiting, and waiting meant losing control. He exhaled slowly, then turned toward her fully for the first time since the movement started, his eyes steady, focused. "Then we do not stay," he said, and the words landed heavy, changing everything again. She looked at him, confusion flickering for a brief second, then something else, understanding starting to form. "They are outside," she said, and Caleb nodded once. "Exactly," his voice low, firm. "They expect us to hide, to stay trapped. That is why they spread out." And he stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "We move before they tighten it." And now the tension shifted again, from defense to risk, from waiting to action. Outside, the sound of movement grew closer, a shadow passing quickly across the edge of the window, and Caleb turned his head slightly, calculating, timing, feeling the seconds slipping away. "Can you ride?" he asked, direct, no hesitation, and she nodded once. Immediate, no doubt, and Caleb felt that lock into place, the plan forming faster now. Not perfect, not safe, but the only option left. He moved quickly, grabbing a small bag from the table, water, a few supplies, nothing more, then slung it over his shoulder, every motion tight, efficient, and behind him, she adjusted the child again, securing him close, ready. The pressure outside kept building, footsteps now just feet away from the walls, voices low, closer than ever, and Caleb stepped toward the back of the house, stopping just short of the door, his hand hovering over the latch, feeling the weight of what came next. He glanced back at her one last time, then at the child, and then forward again, his voice steady when he spoke. "When we step out, there is no turning back," and the question hung there, heavier than anything before, not whether they could escape, but whether this next move would lead them to safety, or straight into something even worse. Caleb did not hesitate anymore. His hand closed around the latch and pulled it open in one clean motion, the door giving way just enough for them to slip through, and the cold air outside hit fast, sharp, carrying the sound of movement far too close. "Now," he said, low and urgent, stepping out first, scanning left, then right, his body tight, ready, and she followed immediately, the child held close against her chest, both of them moving fast but controlled. The ground behind the house was darker, shadows stretching long from the fading light, giving them just enough cover, but not enough to hide for long, and Caleb knew it. Every second out here mattered. A voice echoed faintly from the front of the ranch, sharper now, calling out something they could not fully hear, and Caleb turned his head slightly, calculating. They had been noticed, not seen, but something had changed. "This way," he whispered, guiding them toward the low ridge behind the barn, keeping close to the structure for as long as possible, using every shadow, every angle. But even as they moved, he could feel it, the net tightening behind them. The horse stood tied near the fence, restless now, sensing the tension, and Caleb moved quickly, untying the reins with practiced hands, his movements precise, no wasted motion. But the moment the rope came free, the horse shifted, letting out a low sound that cut through the quiet. Caleb froze for half a second, then cursed under his breath. Too late, the sound carried. "Go," he said, urgency, rising, helping her up first, lifting her with one strong motion, then placing the child securely between them, every second ticking louder now. He swung up behind them, gripping the reins tight, and as he turned the horse toward the open land, a shout came from the side of the house, closer than before, too close. Caleb did not look back. He did not slow. He pushed forward, the horse breaking into a fast run, hooves striking hard against the dry ground as they cleared the edge of the ranch. The wind hit harder now, rushing past them, carrying the sound of pursuit behind, not loud yet, but building, and Caleb leaned forward slightly, guiding the horse toward the narrow path between the hills, the only route that gave them a chance. "Hold on," he said again, his voice steady despite the pressure rising around them, and he felt her grip tighten just slightly. The child pressed between them, silent but present, a weight that made every decision heavier. The land ahead twisted, uneven, forcing the horse to adjust its stride, slowing them just enough to feel dangerous. And Caleb's eyes moved constantly, scanning, searching for the next turn, the next cover, but every path felt narrower than before. Behind them, the sound grew clearer, more riders now, spreading again, not chasing blindly, but tracking, cutting angles, and Caleb knew they were not just following, they were anticipating. His jaw tightened, and for the first time since they left the house, a new thought hit him, heavier than the rest. This was no longer about getting away. This was about how long they could stay ahead. The ridge loomed closer, shadows deepening between the rocks, offering cover, but also hiding whatever might be waiting ahead, and Caleb slowed just enough to guide the horse through the narrow pass, his body tense, ready for anything. The wind dropped suddenly as they entered the gap, the sound of pursuit fading just slightly behind them, and for a brief moment, it felt like they might have space, but Caleb did not trust it, not for a second. He glanced back once, just once, and saw it, figures appearing along the ridge behind them, not far, closer than he wanted, and moving faster now. Caleb faced forward again, his grip tightening on the reins, and the question hit him hard, sharper than before, not whether they could outrun them, but where this path actually led, and whether he had just taken them into something they could not escape. The narrow pass closed tighter around them, the walls of rock rising on both sides, cutting the wind but trapping the sound, and Caleb felt it immediately. This was no longer an escape route. This was a funnel. The horse slowed on its own, hooves struggling for footing on uneven ground, and Caleb pulled back slightly, forcing control, because speed here would break them before the riders ever did. Behind them, the sound changed again, louder now, echoing through the stone, not distant anymore, not fading, but closing, and Caleb knew they had read the land just as well as he had. "They are gaining," she said quietly, and this time there was something else in her voice, not fear, but urgency, like she understood exactly what this place meant. Caleb did not answer, his eyes scanning ahead, searching for anything, a turn, a break, a way out. But the path only narrowed, forcing them deeper, and then he saw it, the ground dipping sharply ahead, a dry ravine cutting across the pass, too wide for the horse to cross clean, too steep to slow down safely. He pulled hard on the reins, bringing the horse to a stop just short of the edge, dust kicking up around them. And for a second, everything held still, the air tight, the sound of pursuit rising behind. Caleb looked back, just once, and saw them. 3 riders already at the entrance of the pass, more shapes appearing behind them, spreading out, cutting off the way back. He turned forward again, fast, his mind racing, options collapsing one by one. And for the first time, the weight of it hit full. There was no clear path, no safe direction, only choices that all led somewhere dangerous. "We cannot stay here," she said, stepping down slightly, adjusting the child, her eyes moving between the ravine and the narrowing path behind them, calculating. Just like him, Caleb slid off the horse, boots hitting the ground hard, and moved to the edge, looking down, measuring. The drop was not deep, but steep enough to risk the horse, and climbing back up on the other side would take time they did not have. The sound behind them grew sharper, voices now, not shouting, but calling out, closer than ever, and Caleb felt the pressure spike again, higher than before, because now it was not about distance, it was about seconds. He turned back to her, his face set, and for a moment, everything slowed, just enough to see the choice clearly. If they stayed, they would be surrounded. If they crossed, they might lose the horse, and without it, they would not outrun anything. The child shifted again, weak but awake, his small hand gripping her shoulder, and Caleb looked at him, then at her, and something inside him locked into place. "You take him," he said, voice firm, already moving, reaching for the small bag, pulling it free and handing it to her. "Go down there. Follow the ravine east. It curves out after half a mile." His words came fast now, clear, deliberate, like he had already decided the rest. She shook her head immediately. "No." The word sharp, almost breaking, but Caleb stepped closer, cutting her off. "Listen," his voice lower now, intense. "They are after you. Not me. I slow them here. You get him out." And the moment hung there, heavy, undeniable, the choice laid bare between them. She stared at him, eyes searching, not for the plan, but for the reason. And Caleb held her gaze, steady, unflinching, because this was the line, the final one, where everything he had done led. Behind them, the first rider entered deeper into the pass, closer now, too close, and Caleb turned slightly, placing himself between her and the approaching figures, his posture shifting again, not defensive, but resolved. "Go," he said, quieter this time, but stronger, and the question hit harder than anything before, not whether she would make it, but whether Caleb was ready to stand alone against what was coming next. She did not move, not at first, her eyes locked on Caleb as the sound of riders closed in behind him, closer with every second, and for a moment it felt like time held still between them, like everything depended on what she chose next. Then the child stirred again, a weak breath, a small hand tightening against her shoulder, and something in her face changed, not hesitation, not fear, but decision. "He is not mine," she said suddenly, her voice low but clear, and Caleb's brow tightened. the words hitting him off guard, cutting through the tension like something deeper than anything before. She stepped closer, just enough for him to see it in her eyes. "He is the chief's son," she added, and the world shifted in that instant, the weight of it landing hard, because this was not just a child, not just a life. This was something that could change everything. Caleb's gaze dropped to the boy, then back to her, and the pieces began to fall into place. The way they chased her, the certainty, the refusal to listen. It was not about truth. It was about control, about keeping a story intact no matter the cost. "The man they say I killed," she continued, faster now, like the words had been waiting. "He was going to take the child, claim him, say the chief was gone, say the line was broken." And Caleb felt the full weight of it now. This was not just survival. This was something bigger, something that threatened more than one life. The riders behind them moved closer into the pass, their shapes clearer now, their voices sharper, calling out. And Caleb stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between her and them again, but his mind was no longer where it had been. The choice was no longer just about helping one person escape. "If they take him," she said, her voice tightening for the first time, "they will decide everything." And there it was, the truth laid bare, not just a child in danger, but a future being taken. Rewritten. Caleb exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest shifting into something else, something steadier, and he looked at her again, really looked, and for the first time he did not just see someone running. He saw someone standing, holding something that mattered far beyond herself. Behind him, the riders slowed as they approached, spreading slightly, cautious now, watching, and Caleb stepped forward another pace, making himself visible, drawing their focus, and the moment stretched, tight, ready to break. "Go," he said again. But this time it was different, not just an order, not just a plan, but something heavier, something tied to everything he had just learned. And she saw it. She understood it. She hesitated for half a second, then turned, moving toward the edge of the ravine. Careful, fast, the child held close, and Caleb watched her go just long enough to know she would make the descent, then turned back fully toward the riders, his stance firm, unshaken. One of the men called out, "Closer now. You are alone now, cowboy." And Caleb did not answer. Not yet, because for the first time since this began, he understood exactly what was at stake, and the choice he had made was no longer just about saving someone. It was about protecting something that could not be replaced. The riders stepped closer, their presence filling the narrow space, and Caleb stood his ground, the tension at its peak. But beneath it, something had shifted, something stronger, because now he knew the truth, and the question was no longer whether he could hold them here, but whether she would reach safety in time. And what would happen when the truth he now carried could no longer be ignored? Caleb stood still as the riders closed in, their presence filling the narrow pass. But something had changed in the air, not just tension, something else, something quieter but stronger, like the moment had already turned. One of the men stepped forward slightly, studying Caleb's face, then glanced past him toward the ravine, and Caleb felt it, the shift in their focus, the hesitation, small but real. "You are protecting her," the man said, not as a question, but as a realization, and Caleb did not answer. He did not need to, because his stance said everything. The wind moved through the pass, carrying a faint sound from below, distant but clear enough, the soft echo of movement along the ravine, and Caleb knew she was still moving, still going, and that alone changed everything. The riders exchanged brief looks, something unspoken passing between them, and Caleb caught it. Not certainty anymore, not the same confidence they had at the ranch. Something had cracked. "You do not even know what she carries," another voice said, quieter now, almost uncertain, and Caleb's jaw tightened, because now he did know, and that knowledge stood behind him like a wall. He took a slow step forward, just one, not aggressive, not threatening, but enough to claim the ground he stood on, and his voice, when it came, was calm, steady. "I know enough." And the words settled heavy in the space between them. Silence followed, longer this time, stretching, and Caleb felt it shift again, the pressure easing just slightly, not gone, but changing direction. One of the riders looked toward the ravine again, then back at Caleb, and for the first time there was doubt in his eyes, not about the chase, but about what it meant. If what you say is true, the man began, then stopped, like the thought itself was too heavy to finish, and Caleb saw it. The opening, small but real. Behind that doubt was something else, something that could grow, something that could turn this moment into something different. Caleb held his ground, not pushing, not retreating, just letting the silence do the work, because for the first time since this began, he was not the one being tested. They were. Another sound rose faintly from the distance, not behind, not beside, but ahead, far along the land beyond the ravine, and one of the riders turned his head sharply, listening. Then another, and Caleb caught it. Recognition flickering across their faces, something unexpected. The man in front looked back at Caleb again, longer this time, and whatever he saw there, whatever settled in that moment, shifted the weight of everything. He exhaled slowly, then stepped back half a pace, not surrendering, but not advancing either. And that small movement changed the entire space. "We will find the truth," he said, voice lower now, less certain than before, and Caleb nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, because that was all this had ever been about. The riders did not rush forward, did not close the distance. They held where they were, watching, waiting, and Caleb stood with them, the tension no longer breaking, but stretching into something else, something unresolved, far below, beyond. The rocks, the faint sound of movement continued, steady, moving away, and Caleb felt it settle in his chest. Not relief, not fully, but something close, something earned. The moment did not end clean, it did not close, but it shifted, and as the light faded across the pass, one truth remained. The choice he made had changed something, not just for her, not just for the child, but for what came next, and the question that lingered, quiet but powerful, was not whether they would meet again, but what would happen when the truth finally reached everyone who refused to see it. The riders did not move for a long moment, not forward, not back, just standing there in the fading light as the weight of everything settled between them, and Caleb felt it in his chest, not as tension anymore, but as something deeper, something that would stay long after this moment passed. The man in front gave a small nod, almost to himself, then turned his horse slightly, not in retreat, not fully, but enough to shift the direction of what came next, and one by one the others followed, their eyes lingering on Caleb just a second longer before they pulled back from the pass. Caleb did not move, not yet. He stayed where he stood, watching until the last shadow disappeared beyond the ridge, until the sound of hooves faded into something distant and uncertain, and only then did he exhale, slow, steady, like he had been holding it the entire time. The silence that followed was different now, not empty, but full, carrying everything that had just happened, and Caleb turned slowly toward the ravine, his eyes tracing the path she had taken, the narrow line that curved out of sight, and for a moment he just stood there, listening, hoping, waiting. Far below, faint but real, came the sound of movement, softer now, further away, but steady, and Caleb felt something shift inside him again, not relief, not completely, but enough to know she was still going, still holding on. He stepped closer to the edge, looking down into the fading light, and for a second he thought he saw it, a small figure moving along the bend. The child held close, her steps careful but certain, and then it was gone, swallowed by distance and shadow. Caleb remained there a moment longer, the wind brushing against his face, carrying the last traces of what had been, and then he turned back slowly, the past behind him quiet now, the danger gone for now, but not forgotten. He walked back toward the horse, his steps slower than before, each one carrying the weight of what had changed, not just out there, but in him, because this place, this land, it was no longer the same as it had been that morning. When he reached the ridge, he stopped once more, looking out across the open desert, the sky stretching wide, colors fading into night, and for the first time since this began, there was space to think, to feel what this choice had meant. He had nothing to gain from it, no promise, no reward, just a moment where he chose not to turn away, and somehow that had been enough to change everything. Behind him, the wind picked up again, moving through the pass, through the rocks, carrying a sound that felt almost like a whisper, and Caleb glanced back one last time toward the path she had taken, toward the place where her story now continued without him. He did not know where she would go, or what would happen when the truth reached those who had refused to see it. But he knew one thing: she was no longer running alone. Caleb rested his hand lightly on the saddle, his gaze still fixed on the horizon, and a quiet question lingered in the fading light. Not heavy, not urgent, but real: whether this was the end of their crossing paths, or just the beginning of something neither of them had expected.